Hello there everybody, and welcome back to another episode of An Ecologist Plays, the channel where we are learning more about nature by playing games. We are back in the Hunter, Call of the Wild, and we have a mission to harvest 5 Springbuck in Vusha. We are currently in Vusha, and you can see there are a few spots where there's a bit of hunting pressure, so we're going to head more towards this side, and hopefully on the plains here we will encounter some Springbuck. Springbuck, as mentioned before, really more a plains animal. You wouldn't find them really in the thickets like that. That is more the domain of an antelope known as the impala, which superficially resembles a Springbuck, just with different colors and much larger. And, come to think of it, it doesn't resemble a Springbuck at all. But anyway, I digress. Those two species have got very, very different habitats and niches or roles that they fill in the environment, with Springbuck focusing more on eating forbs, which are basically small little herbs growing all over between the grasses here, and smaller shrubs, and then the impala focusing more on eating grass and shrubs and larger trees like these. Anything within their browsing height they would be eating. So you find Springbuck more in the plains, more in the grasslands and the so-called Namakuru shrublands, the more arid shrublands of South Africa, and you find your impala more where there is savanna, where there's also some thickets available. I am just going to look around and see if I can see a Springbuck, and I'll be back with you in a flash. Right now I finally found one, and I'm just going to sneak around more towards the right hand side here to move up there, because it is currently basically downwind of us and we don't want it smelling us before we get too close. You have to be careful. Now previously, our adopted grandfather in the game here did tell us that the animals will smell a sweaty human quite a long distance away. Well, one thing that will spook them even more is a strong scent, like strong deodorant or perfume or things like that as well. That will also tend to spook them generally quite a bit. So one tends to avoid overall strong scents when out in the field. But then the weird thing is that big cats, like leopards for example, are very often attracted to those weird scents. So a friend of mine years and years and years ago, when we were first and second year, he did research on leopards in the area where I am. And he put up camera traps all over the place, and in front of the camera traps he would spray things like perfume, things like hoity-toity and all kinds of things, and have weird reactions from the cats where they would rub on the rocks where the perfume was sprayed, and in that way he could get good photos of the leopards, and he could then use that to identify, to determine how many leopards there actually are in the area, because each leopard spots are generally unique. Okay, that little guy is about 75 meters away, and we're going to take out a new rifle, one that I haven't used here before, which is the Vasquez .45 Cyclone. It's a relatively quiet one and should allow us to get a kill on that one without scaring everything else away. And here we go. There is the Springbuck. Very, very quick kill. Okay, and that's it.
There's one Springbuck.
And now we just need an additional 4. So this is going to take a while for me to do, but I will be back with you in a moment. So in my crusade against the man-made color variants, I have gotten distracted. And there we go. A golden blue wildebeest, which is, that's going to be saved and taxidermied a bit later. But time to now go look for some Springbuck. I have seen everything else except Springbuck. I have seen gemsbok, like the one running over there. I've seen blue wildebeest, like the one I shot here. I've seen side-striped jackal. I've seen hares. I have seen everything, well, except lions, buffalo, lesser kudu, and Springbuck. Maybe I haven't seen everything, but I haven't seen Springbuck yet. And now I've seen lion as well. Now on my way to go look for some Springbuck, I have spotted another color variant. Another blue wildebeest, a golden blue wildebeest. And that means, since my heart rate is ready, we're going to take that one out. We're not going to kill the rest of the herd, we're just getting rid of all the color variants. As mentioned before, these were all bred, basically artificially by selecting certain individuals from certain herds and basically doing line breeding with them. and to some extent, like you'd have different dogs, different dog breeds being developed, well, same thing here with the wildebeest, really inbreeding them quite a lot. And as a result, genetically they really are not very good. And for quite a while, all these color variants were very popular on game farms, especially for hunting and just for breeding. It is one of those things that it had value because people thought that it was going to be valuable for hunting. And then suddenly the bubble just kind of burst, as I've mentioned before. And that's another gold trophy golden wildebeest. That is, yeah, you can see here it does resemble, I mean, it's a blue wildebeest still. But if you look at the coloration, blue wildebeest generally don't look like this. They are grayer in color. Now, one would think that the brownish color here would actually make them better camouflaged in areas, so they would survive a little bit better. But obviously, over the development of the species, over time, this color, even if it were present in the past somehow, the only ones we still have left are gray in color. So the gray color obviously gives a bigger benefit to the blue wildebeest than that browner color. And I think it's because that brown color will really stand out against the green, for example, of the shrubs over here. Whereas a grayer color may look like a rock, whether you are in a wooded environment or in an open environment, it doesn't matter. That gray color may actually be better camouflage for them. Oh, there we go, finally. The gray color may be better camouflage than the brown color would be, because that brown color would stand out against a different background. Now, brown color may be a good color to go for if you have some way of disrupting your coloration. And that is what the Springbuck and to some extent the Gemsbuck with a grey, black and white will do. But let's have a look at the Springbuck once we spot them right up ahead. They are directly downwind from us, so surely they are going to smell us. Obviously now they are fleeing. Now behind them you could see right over there are some blue wildebeest lying around, okay? And that one there, for example, is relatively well camouflaged. More camouflaged than it would be if it were that golden brown color. I mean, those ones as well. If they stand still, they are far more difficult to spot than a golden wildebeest would have been. And so I am just doing the species a favor by removing those color variants from the population, so that the genetics are stronger in the population. Okay, finally found another one. It's quite a distance away, so we are just slowly going to be making our way there. And here's a little tip: if you're ever in this game and you, for example, spot that Springbuck over there, and you go into your map and you zoom in, it will show you where you spotted it. And you can actually go and click there and just say place waypoint, and then you will know exactly where that animal is when you spotted it, and how far away it is or was at that point in time. There are quite a few Springbuck in this area. We may be able to take out almost an entire herd here. Okay, the one on the left hand side is about 100 meters away. Again, we're using the Vasquez 0.45 Cyclone. And unfortunately, it does seem that one shot did scare away the rest of the herd, even though it really shouldn't have. Maybe it's to do with the fact that we're upwind of them. Maybe they are just skittish by nature. Unfortunately, we didn't get a clear shot on that one, but we did manage to hit it, and we're just going to be following its trail. And it seems to have run into the denser vegetation. Now, normally the Springbuck would prefer being in the open, as that's where they will be able to spot their predators or danger, spot other individuals of their species, and it's overall just a better place for them to be. However, if they do feel threatened, a lot of animals will tend to go into denser vegetation to try and hide, because clearly being out in the open means that they were spotted for some reason, miraculously. So may as well run into the denser vegetation and try to hide from danger there. Now, Springbuck, as amazing and as perfectly adapted as they are for the arid environment, so fickle they can be in their survival as well. In many cases, all it takes is a very wet winter for them to actually just die in massive numbers or relatively large numbers. But they have this ability to start breeding at a very, very young age. The females in particular will actually start breeding at a few months old, I believe. Males will very often take a year or two before they actually are mature to actually breed, but they can breed very, very quickly. Every year, every few months actually. There's no set breeding season for them, so they can calve throughout the year and very quickly replenish their numbers again. It is estimated that there are quite a few 100,000 to a few million of them in southern Africa where they occur. Really a gorgeous animal. Unfortunately did not get the vital organ there, because otherwise it would have been a silver trophy. Nonetheless, we did manage to get him. And as I was mentioning earlier, the brown color here of the Springbuck on its own may not necessarily be the best camouflage. But if you have some kind of disruptive camouflage, like this black line and the white belly here, then, and the black line along the eye here, then it becomes a little bit more difficult if you see this out in the field to know immediately that you are looking at a Springbuck. And that second or two of you second guessing yourself, or if you are a predator, that second or two of you second guessing yourself, that may be the difference between life and death for the Springbuck, because it may give it that second or two's time to actually spot you and then to start running away from you. So this is what we call disruptive camouflage. It's a type of camouflage where you're not necessarily trying to really be perfect in looking the same as your background. Instead, you are trying to disrupt your outline, making it more difficult for predators to know immediately what they are looking at when they spot you. And it's just the idea is just to give them a split second more time to spot you and start running away.
Two Springbuck. Good lion.
Yes, Grandpa, but it's taking me much longer than I anticipated. Now, Springbuck do very often travel in herds, as I've mentioned before, but nowadays they don't travel in as bigger herds as they used to in the past. In the up to the 1800s and I think start of the 1900s perhaps, there would have been large herds of Springbuck occasionally moving through southern Africa, especially through South Africa, through the Karoo, where there were probably millions of them moving at a time. And they stretched for kilometers on end as far as the eye could see. It was just Springbuck, Springbuck everywhere, and they would run through towns, and you'd have people, and it wasn't only Springbuck, there were some black wildebeest and red hartebeest and all kinds of antelope with the Springbuck, but Springbuck made up the majority of those antelope, and they would literally be running into town, in on the one side, out on the other side. But those massive herds of Springbuck are what we called trekbokken. Trekbokken referring to, or basically migrating goats, or migrating antelope. And I would have loved to see those massive herds of the Springbuck moving through the Karoo. Now, the reason they actually started these migrations is because they were running out of food. There would have been a few years of good rainfall, above average rainfall, lots of food, most of the babies would have survived in the area that they were at. And then obviously drier times would come along, food would start running out, and then they would have to start moving. And as they moved through the landscape, they would be joined by other little herds. So each little herd meeting up with another little herd, eventually forming larger herds, which would merge with larger herds, forming these massive herds moving through the landscape. And they would flatten trees. Relatively large acacia trees would be flattened as they run around the tree, weakening the roots around there. The trees would fall over, they would run over the trees. Whole trees would be just trampled under these smallish antelope, which I think is amazing. And then they would move through the entire area, eating everything in sight. Now, it may sound bad, they eat everything in sight, but they also poop everywhere, and that's a very nice fertilizer, so the vegetation would have bounced back. It was a natural cycle, but unfortunately, due to fences being put up and hunting pressure at some point, they stopped doing these migrations. The fences in particular were a problem because, as I've mentioned previously, although they are called Springbuck, which means jumping goat or jumping antelope, they're not very good at jumping, and they can be kept in an area relatively easily with a relatively low fence. So even just putting up a normal fence to keep your sheep in would have prevented these antelope from migrating. So the Springbuck all but died out. There are some reports, I believe, from Botswana where they may still occur to some extent, but nowhere near the numbers that they occurred at here in South Africa, which really, for me, that is quite sad. I just heard a blue wildebeest up here somewhere. I can't see it, but it knows that I am in the area. And a lot of antelope will give a warning snort, just to let all the other individuals of their species know that, listen guys, there is danger here. And now it's obviously fleeing. There is some danger here. It's not usually, with most species, it's not a long, drawn-out call, because that would enable the predator to also know exactly where they are. But a short snort, like we have with the blue wildebeest in the game here, and in real life as well, that's generally a good way of communicating with each other that there is danger in the area without the predator being able to triangulate where exactly you are. Of course, it could hear me moving through the vegetation even when I was just walking along here. Very, very good hearing, the blue wildebeest. As I've mentioned, they've got better hearing and smell than the zebras do, but zebras have got better eyesight. So with those two species often occurring together, that basically covers all their bases. And there goes the wildebeest that had heard me. But today it seems we haven't had a lot of springbuck in the game here. In theory, one could say that maybe they have actually moved somewhere else. I'm not sure whether this Virunga Savannah Reserve is actually fenced off. I would guess it isn't. And that would enable things like the springbuck to actually move to other greener pastures now that they may have eaten some of the vegetation in the area. So let's say that the springbuck have migrated elsewhere, and that's why we cannot see any of them today. But that is also where we are going to be calling it a day, everybody. So if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like. Please subscribe if you haven't yet. It really helps the channel to grow as well, so that more people can learn about nature as we play things like The Hunter, Call of the Wild. So until next time, everybody, please stay safe. I will see you guys again soon. Bye!